Welcome to the Disinformation Tech Podcast, where we explore the role that technology plays in both spreading and combating disinformation.
We didn't try to use fake news. It's become a tool of war.
The kind of conversation around AI overlooks the issue of misinformation.
Next for AI and disinformation.
It's one of my areas of greatest concern.
Facebook and Google advertising linked to disinformation.
Disinformation.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Well, a new venture aims to help people navigate through fake news on social media.
So one North Carolina startup is working to help people sort through all the clutter and get to the facts.
Fighting fake news and misinformation. His app is called Logically.
Can artificial intelligence fix the fake news problem? Well, a new online news startup called Nowhere is betting on it.
Authenticate works such that it fingerprints the video as it's being recorded and then writes those fingerprints to a blockchain record.
Factiverse. Our product instantly fact checks any claims made.
The only thing that can filter AI is AI. Introducing Vigilant, the first real-time AI truth checker.
When it's moving at a scale that humans can't manage on their own, we need to bring intelligent machines into the picture.
Everyone, welcome to the Track Disinformation Podcast. Today we have with us Lino, and what we are going to do is essentially use this as a platform and use this as a podcast to delve deep into the world of logic, critical thinking, and the battle against disinformation. Now, first, I would like to say what we're going to do for this introduction here is actually read the intro, and there's a few reasons for that. The first and foremost reason being that we want to make sure we get the information correct. After all, this is a podcast about disinformation, and we do not wish to be a part of the spread of it. So there's a historical reference I'm going to draw in the intro, and I want to make sure that I'm factually accurate, or at least doing my due diligence to be factually accurate in that historical reference. Having said that, this is a podcast that is going to highlight the tools that are being used for good. This is a podcast that's going to be used to essentially provide a platform for the creators of technology that are trying to put systems and processes in place and technology in place that combats the spread of disinformation and prevents it. Now, with that said, there is an important caveat and disclaimer here that we must add. We will occasionally probably bring on guests or at least mention technologies that are being used to spread disinformation. We are not proponents of that by any means. Rather, we are trying to highlight the solutions to the problem. So there is a wide array of technologies being used to spread disinformation, and there's a wide array of technologies currently that are being used to combat the spread of it. For those who are interested in this subject, we have a Reddit thread and a community that you can follow. You can share the technology that you're learning about, or you can share the technology that maybe you've created yourself. And I'm going to show you that Reddit thread right now, so you can actually see it for yourself. So what you are going to see on your screen right here is r/disinformation tech. Now, for those of you who maybe don't have a Reddit account, I do think that it's a neat platform, and highly recommended by myself personally. You'll notice here in the description that we're a growing community. The goal and the ambition is big. Right now we're small, and so we're looking for moderators, we're looking for people who can help this grow, and any support is greatly appreciated. Second to this, we have trackdisinformation.com. And trackdisinformation.com is going to be the place where we store the list of playlists for the podcast. And it's also going to be a place where we try to provide different services and tools for people who are in this field. One thing that I'm particularly excited about and hope to promote, although I do recognize it will probably take some time for this to take hold, is the job board. And so this will be a place for anyone who is working in the disinformation field to go and post a job, and hopefully make this a community where people who are passionate about the subject can go and find work in the field and in the area of study. So that's the introduction for the platform, where you can go to get engaged, stay in touch. We're also going to create a YouTube channel for this that's going to be essentially just at Disinformation Tech on YouTube, and you can follow us there. So having said all of that, what I am about to do is essentially read off the introduction for you guys, and then we'll kick it off there, and we'll introduce our guest to you today, who is going to talk about a GitHub repository and a piece of software that he has created, and that software can be used for real-time fallacy checking of video-based content. So having said that, without further ado, this is the introduction that I'm going to read, hopefully for the sake of better quality and also for accuracy. So the tool that we're going to talk about today has the potential to not only be a tool for academics or debaters, but also for the general public. In our digital age where video content is consumed at an unprecedented rate, the potential for spreading disinformation is immense. From social media clips to political speeches, logical fallacies can be slipped into the narrative, subtly influencing and misleading viewers. Recognizing and understanding these fallacies is essential, but it can be a daunting task for the average viewer. This is but one area where artificial intelligence may help to safeguard future generations. By automatically detecting and displaying fallacies, we now have the ability to empower viewers and alert them as to when they should critically evaluate the information they are presented with. This, in conjunction with human efforts, I believe, is an approach that will probably provide a broader base and help satisfy more use cases. Obviously, human-based fact-checking is a little limited in the sense that there is a speed issue involved there, whereas real-time fallacy checking conducted by software and artificial intelligence can obviously, as the name implies, do that real-time. So to illustrate the profound impact the software could have, as well as the importance and need of the software, I would like for us to first take a step back in history. And so one of the most notorious examples of using logical fallacies to manipulate public opinion comes from Adolf Hitler. In the following 1 minute long video that we're about to play, Hitler addressed the Reichstag on January the 30th, 1939. For those who are listening without video and subtitles, we will translate the 1 minute video clip that follows after the video has played. Please note that this video will be shown here for educational purposes only. The clip that follows is disturbing, and it may not be appropriate for those under 18 years of age.
Die Völker werden in kurzer Zeit erkennen, dass das nationalsozialistische Deutschland keine Feindschaft mit anderen Völkern will. Ich will heute wieder ein Prophet sein. Wenn es dem internationalen Finanzjudentum in und außerhalb Europas gelingen sollte, die Völker noch einmal in einen Weltkrieg zu stürzen, dann wird das Ergebnis nicht die Bolschewisierung der Erde und damit der Sieg des Judentums sein, sondern die Vernichtung der jüdischen Rasse in Europa.
Okay, so for those who are listening via audio and who don't have video, I'm going to provide the transcript of what was said there. So to state in English what was said in the video, Hitler said, and I quote, "I want once again to be a prophet. If the international Jewish financiers inside and outside of Europe should succeed in plunging the nations once more into war, then the result will not be the Bolshevization of the earth and thus the victory of Jewry, but the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe." Adolf Hitler often employed logical fallacies in his retort to manipulate public opinion and consolidate his power. The notable example of the scapegoating fallacy above and the quote from Hitler that we just mentioned is a type of ad hominem fallacy. This involves blaming a person or a group for problems that are not necessarily their fault, diverting attention from the actual issues and simplifying complex problems. During his rise to power and throughout his regime, Hitler frequently blamed the Jews. He blamed the Jews for Germany's economic hardships, their social problems, and political instability. This was prominently featured in his speeches, propaganda, and writings such as Mein Kampf. Scapegoating, or the ad hominem fallacy, is seen here when Hitler attributed a wide array of societal problems to the Jewish population, claiming that the Jews were responsible for Germany's defeat in World War I, the economic depression, and the moral decline of society. This was a baseless attack on the character and identity of the Jewish people, rather than addressing the actual complex causes of these issues. Instead of providing evidence for his claims, Hitler attacked the Jewish people as a whole, portraying them as the root cause of various problems. This diverted attention from the real economic and political issues that Germany faced. By blaming Jews for Germany's woes, Hitler simplified complex socioeconomic problems into a single, identifiable enemy. This rallied public support through a common enemy and justified his and the Nazi Party's extreme policies. In addition to the ad hominem fallacy, Hitler also committed the fallacy of appeal to authority. By declaring himself a prophet, Hitler is suggesting in this video clip that we just showed that his previous predictions, whatever they may have been, have come true, and he is thereby attempting to establish his credibility and his authority to make future predictions. This is an appeal to his own authority rather than providing evidence or logical arguments to support his specific prediction about the consequences of Jewish financiers' actions. By invoking his prophetic status, Hitler aims to persuade his audience to accept his dire predictions without critically evaluating the evidence or reasoning behind them. This rhetorical strategy relies on his established authority and the fear it generates rather than on factual accuracy. This fallacious reasoning not only fostered widespread anti-Semitism, but also paved the way for the horrific atrocities of the Holocaust. By convincing a significant portion of the population that Jews were to blame for their misfortunes, Hitler was able to implement his genocidal agenda with relatively little resistance. Hitler's use of the scapegoating fallacy exemplifies how logical fallacies can be weaponized to manipulate public perception, justify heinous actions. Recognizing such fallacies is crucial to understanding and preventing similar manipulative tactics in contemporary context. And as the host of this podcast, I believe that if we can build a world where we can more easily recognize these fallacies, then that will be building a safer world. And that's the whole point of this conversation, and why we're here today. It's a conversation of great importance. We still see these types of fallacies being spread and used by politicians on a global stage. We see it here in the U.S. We see it overseas. And I know it's an issue I'm passionate about, and I think it's an issue that our host that our guest here today is also passionate about. So having said that, what I want to do, everyone, is take a second to show you a few more clips and links that Lino has provided with us, and give a brief introduction of the technology before turning it over to Lino for his own introduction. So what Lino has done for us is he has went out and he has created a tool that is open source and available on GitHub. And I'm going to show you all that. For those who don't know, GitHub is a platform now owned by Microsoft that is an open source platform in its heart and by its nature. I would say probably at least maybe half of the software industry uses GitHub to manage their code repositories. Another popular alternative is GitLab, but to keep this short, GitHub is a place for software developers to share their work and collaborate with others. And they can do that privately or they can do it in public. And what's really remarkable is the software developers who have chosen to do that in public. So Lino has done a very charitable thing here, and he has made this repository for this real-time fact-checking tool available to any software developer that might want to go in and maybe submit a change or maybe just continue to build on that knowledge set. And so in this way, I think the human race can continue to grow and stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak. And I do believe that Lino is the first to set that stepping stone and get us headed in the right direction here. So this GitHub repository available here is the source code for what I'm about to show you, which is a YouTube channel where Lino has kind of provided us with a demo of the software in action. Going to play this short video.
Well, sir, is it fair to say he blew it when, in fact, when there was record low unemployment before COVID?
Yeah, but because what he did, even before COVID, manufacturing went in the hole. Manufacturing went in the hole.
Excuse
number
me,
one.
Chris. Wait.
Number two.
Chris.
Number three.
So as you can see, as this speech unfolds, we see the text content actually changing on the screen?
It would take. No, you were number 2. No, Chris. They said it would take a miracle.
And what is happening here is ChatGPT is actually taking that text and is trying to find logical fallacies. Now, it's important to note that there's a difference between logical fallacies and disinformation. And there's a difference between disinformation and misinformation. Those are some terms we're going to talk about today. So, what is actually happening here? You know, if we watch that video and we see that software at play, are we fact checking the politicians? And the answer is no. The answer is we are not fact checking the politicians. A fact check is just an attempt to see if a claim is true or false, right? Whereas logical fallacies are just errors in reasoning, or it's a potentially malicious attempt to manipulate the English language or any language for that matter in such a way that that you can persuade someone to believe what it is that you might want them to believe. Logical fallacies are often committed intentionally, although sometimes they're committed unintentionally. It is very common for, I would say, anyone, even myself, to commit a logical fallacy. And what is interesting about logical fallacies is, at least here in the US, there's something that's not widely taught in the public school system. And I know I myself did not know about logical fallacies until later in life. So I must stress that, again, this is not fact checking. The software currently is not fact checking. It's checking for logical fallacies. It's logically fallacy checking. It's logical fallacy checking, for lack of better words, right? I had to say logically fallacy checking because that just sounded funny. And you know, in the historical example of Hitler, the fallacy that was committed was scapegoating, and that's essentially just trying to direct the attention off of the real problem at hand and find someone that you can rally against, right? And get a group to rally against that someone or that other group to help distract them from the true nature of the problem. And this is something that plays on human psychology. Other fallacies might be an attack on an individual's character, rather than addressing the argument that they actually have, right? So someone can have a true and factual argument and be a bad person, right? You know, their argument might still be true. Their argument might still be valid. It might still be a sound argument. You know, the fact that they're maybe a bad person, you know, makes no difference. And likewise, someone that's a good person can have a bad argument, and that argument is not necessarily right or true just because they're a good person. So this is kind of the nature of what logical fallacies are. If you're interested in logical fallacies, learning more about those, I'll try to put some links in the description below. But having said all of that, Lino, I'll turn it over to you. I'll hand you the floor and just take a quick second to introduce ourselves for our guests, or introduce yourself for our guests.
All right, thanks, Ari. Yeah, so my name's Lino Valdovinos. Yeah, I'm the creator of this repository. My background is in computer science. Like yourself, I also didn't learn about fallacies till way later in life. And I've always been really interested in applying them into my daily life, right? But I noticed that, you know, it's easier to spot when somebody might be, well, it's not even easy. I would say it takes some effort really to spot when logical fallacies are being made. It's like you might have a hunch. It's like, maybe that's one of them. I don't remember off the top of my head which one, so I have to go look it up. And it takes a little bit of effort, right? You have to kind of like take yourself away from the situation where you're currently being presented with those fallacies to be able to really look into them and address them. And so this is really an aim to try to solve that and kind of help, you know, spread and awareness to fallacies, and maybe help in general by understanding those as they're occurring in real time, and see how that can benefit the discourse, right? As these conversations and discussions are happening. But yeah, that's a little bit about myself. So yeah, thanks, Ari.
Yeah. So you mentioned something there that sticks with me, which is something that we've talked about briefly in other conversations, and that's this idea that logical fallacies are relatively hard to detect. And so, I mentioned that I will sometimes occasionally commit a logical fallacy unwittingly, and catch myself in the act of doing so. But I'm sure there are probably more times whenever in just everyday speech or whatever it might be, I commit a logical fallacy. Um, and then two, on that same note, there are instances where I'm watching the news or I'm consuming a piece of video content, which, as we know, most people they largely consume video content. They don't read as much, and there are a lot of reasons for that. Conveniency and busy schedules that everyone has. But the thing that I'll notice when I'm watching the news or just watching an online video is I will often just take it at face value. I think it's human nature to just leisurely consume content. I think it's human nature um, to take things at face value for the most part. Um, and and I'm a fairly critical person, and I still do that. That's probably my default mode, right? I maybe I'm not doing myself enough justice there, but I think the same could probably be said for most people. If you look at the news cycle, especially if you look at the presidential seasons, and the political seasons, which occur every 2 years, and the presidential season every 4 years. Um, it stands to reason that most people are probably going through these um, portions of heightened advertising, and heightened political activity. They're probably going through these political seasons with somewhat of a critical lens, but probably mostly I already believe what I believe kind of lens. And okay, this is what's going on, but I believe this, and this aligns with what I believe. So I believe it. I'm just going to listen to it. Maybe I'm going to be a little critical, but for the most part, I'm just going to leisurely consume this content by this political ad or this political speaker, or they encounter someone that they don't agree with, and they just they immediately turn it off, and then they go and they seek more content that currently supports what they believe, right? And this phenomenon is called the cognitive bias, which I think we're all guilty of. It's essentially the same as saying, if I'm a Republican, I'm more likely to watch Fox News. Why would I go watch CNN? And if I'm, a liberal or Democrat, whatever, I'm probably more likely to watch a news station like CNN. And why would I go watch Fox News, right? It's going to be agitating for me to go to the opposing platform. It's going to conflict with my worldview. And I would rather do the more leisure thing, and that's go to my news station that is just going to confirm what I already believe. And so I do think that it's the human nature side of us that makes us consume content leisurely and search out content for entertainment and leisure, for whatever reason. I do think that everyone has agency, and I do think that everyone is of the ability to think critically. But I think we're up against our own worst enemy, which is ourselves. So this idea of creating technology that can fact check real time is something that can make it easier for us to see whenever maybe we should put on our critical thinking cap and use a little more caution whenever we're watching video. So yeah, I mean, if you would, Lino, could you maybe explain, in what way, or maybe in maybe mention some context where you think this might help us, maybe catch something, or maybe it might be something that could help us not just passively consume the content. Or some ways we might make it fun. I don't know. Just in what ways do you see this particular piece of software making it easier for us to catch logical fallacies?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I mean, you pointed out a lot of things, right? Like, I think, like you said, everybody's guilty of, not catching themselves as they're making we're probably all making, and we're not critical of all the arguments that we make, right? Or we're also not critical of arguments that reinforce our beliefs, right? And so this is kind of like having a third perspective that's, can quickly analyze and process information that's being generated, or that you're consuming, and provide a lens to do that critical assessment of those arguments for you, and kind of also facilitate, the accessibility to logical fallacies, because that's something else that we've talked in the past, which is that logical fallacies are not the most accessible thing. um, they have weird names, a lot of them, like ad hominems, like you mentioned. And so in this case, really, I think this is a way which, it can start making logical fallacies accessible to a broader audience. I don't think it's there yet, right? I think in the video that you demonstrated, it's not quite as digestible as I would like it to be. Like, you still, like, it's doing the transcription at the bottom, and then it's, every so few, like, sentences, it'll parse those transcriptions and try to analyze it for logical fallacies. I think, that approach is too much information overload, because you're trying to pay attention to the debate. Maybe you'll look at the transcription as is being generated, um, but also being able to read through the logical fallacy as the debate is going on is probably a little bit too demanding, too much overload in terms of the information that you have to process. I do see the direction where this can become more accessible. We've had some discussions, right, where we say, like, maybe we could turn this into a scoreboard that tracks logical fallacies over people, and then if you want to look over exactly what are the fallacies, like, look more deeply into it, you can. um but yeah, those are some of the directions that I'd like to go with it. um yeah.
So the scoreboard would essentially work such that, say you have two debaters on a screen, it would differentiate between the two speakers, and so the software would have to say, okay, this is speaker A and this is speaker B. Otherwise, it might mix up, who's actually committing the fallacy. So the software has to have that ability. And then two, what it would do is it would just maybe add a tally, right? And so we've got a +5 over here. The speaker committed 5 logical fallacies. Click here to see more, or something along those lines. And then over here over this speaker's bubble, if you will, maybe there's a +8. Maybe this speaker committed 8 fallacies. And so you can see maybe who is more prone to commit a logical fallacy. Again, that wouldn't necessarily point to who's promoting more fake news or more disinformation necessarily, but it would show maybe who is either A, less able to formulate logical and coherent arguments in the best case scenario, or B, it may show in the worst case scenario who is being the most malicious in their tactics and in their retort and their rhetoric. And so that is food for thought and conversation. And then the other little bit there that comes to mind is at some point, this software could be used to not only check for logical fallacies, but also potentially fact check real time. But that's a separate problem in and of itself. And so I would like to talk about all of that. But first, let's dive back into this idea of a scoreboard. And this idea of being able to distinguish between two different speakers. That way you can allocate who's actually committing the fallacies in a particular piece of content. I don't know, would you be able to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's kind of the problem that I'm trying to solve right now. So it'd probably be a good idea to highlight exactly what it is. So it's called a diarization problem. So there are software out there that can do diarization, which is like you mentioned, distinguishing between the speakers. So you have your speaker A and your speaker B. But the problem that I haven't figured out is how to do that real time. I've looked into some potential options like using language vision models, like models that have vision, for instance, and have those be able to, you know, share an image of the speech that's happening, and then tell you who is currently speaking within that frame, right? Based on the image itself. Um, there are some challenges with that still currently. I think we're still very early in the technology, like large language models and other AI models, and probably early in terms of the hardware to run these type of models as well. I think it's going to become a lot more accessible and faster, right, as time goes on. But running like a vision model real time is still a challenge. There are models that can do it, but they can be fairly large. So there's a budget in terms of compute that's required to run this. Of course, I'm also trying to look into solutions that you don't have to use your local compute, right? So you can use an API through whatever your favorite provider of this technology is, right? So if you wanted to go with Cloud, or if you want to go with OpenAI, so you could do that. But the challenge is that a lot of these companies won't actually classify humans within the image, right? So it's also I believe they're doing it for safety purposes, but that also faces a challenge. So it's like whether or not you can do that.
Right. Yeah, and of course, as with anything with technology, you live this idea of the fact that it's a problem now currently, maybe a challenge, but it's also probably something that's not going to be a challenge at some point in the future. And I'm sure that there's going to be ethical ways that enter the scene that provide an approachable way to do that diarization. In a way that's not interfering with anyone's identity in the video, and just literally just differentiating between the two speakers via the audio perhaps. But you know the the software as it currently stands is still usable despite that problem, because what it does show you is when those logical fallacies are potentially being committed. And so even though it might not be able to pull out who in the debate is actually speaking, you can, as a human being, right, tell just based off the transcript that's being displayed on the screen, who was the individual that said or spoke that particular sentence or phrase or paragraph or whatever piece of text or audio is being called into question. One thought that I had whenever you mentioned this idea of a scoreboard is this concept that if you can gamify a product, if you can gamify anything, it makes it more engaging. And there are a lot of companies that use gamification to increase engagement with their platform, and it's a known thing. Of course, obviously, the whole world at large, something about the human race like sports, and scoreboards are very common. And so I have to agree with you 100%. I do think that this approach and this direction it's approachable, and you're right. Logical fallacies, they're not very approachable by by their own nature and in their own right. If I say ad hominem, I'm using what's probably Latin, right? That a lot of people, I never took Latin in school. I had a lot of college, friends that did take Latin in school, but they sound foreign. A lot of these fallacies, and a lot of times they don't sound fun. They may come off as as kind of like an arcane or pointless thing for someone to learn, just due to their nature. But if you can gamify something, or if you can make it fun in some way, then that changes things a little bit, and it does make the subject a little more approachable. So second to that technology current limitation of diarization, I think there is still somewhat of a limitation on the ability of tools like this to fact check. However, I don't think that that applies as much to logical fallacies, because logical fallacies have a structure, and they're more like, if A implies B and B implies C, then therefore A must imply C, right? So logical fallacies are something that's it's almost computer-like in the sense that in the way that they work. So computers are, they're based on logic, and it's very easy for a computer and for AI to pick out these logical fallacies. Fact checking, on the other hand, it's a much harder problem, because there's so many variables at play. Without getting into the weeds on it, I would like to get your thoughts on that. On the difference between using software like this to check for logical fallacies and using it to fact check. Where might you see that going in the future, and what might be some considerations there?
Yeah, I would say it's a natural progression, right, to think about. It's like, if we can do this real time, maybe the next step would be also to do real time fact checking. I do think it's going to be possible. I don't think we're there yet. Maybe if you have a lot of access to a lot of compute, you might be able to do this, right? You need a lot of fast inference. I do think models like this, now that we're going to a more agentic, right? Well, in which you can have a model, have a task, and have it utilize the internet, utilize tools to solve that problem, right? So it's like, as these arguments are happening, somebody makes a claim that X happened and therefore Y, then you can have the model go through the internet, go through various sources, maybe create a framework where it can rank sources and their values, and also aggregate and see across multiple credible sources whether those claims add up, and then you can get the model return back whether or not that claim was true or false, right? I do think that's possible. It's just those amount of steps that would be required to do that currently, right? Like, if you use a large language model service, you get an idea of how fast these things are at doing inference, right? You see them spitting out words at a certain, like, call it tokens per second, right? So roughly how many words per second they're able to do. And obviously, the bigger the model is, the slower it is going to be at inference. So there's a trade-off there. But I mean, assuming Moore's law holds and we get dedicated compute, which we're starting to see for these things, I can definitely see that happening one day. I think I really would like it to be at the point where it can also just be an open source product like this is, right? In the sense that, hey, I am able to run it myself. I am able to run it on my own compute. I can use my model. I can access it or have access to the models that I want to use, and kind of set that framework up. Where it's more like, I'll be more willing to listen to this because I have more control over it, and to trust that it's doing a good job, or to trust that that it's being fair and representative of what I want, and also being able to check it and see everything that might go into with those decisions myself.
Yeah. So it's interesting, because I was talking with another developer about this idea, and well, it wasn't the subject of our conversation, but I brought it up, and he said, I think that this is something that would not work, or something to that effect. Those weren't his exact words, but he essentially said that he did not believe that you could use artificial intelligence to fact check real time, and that you should use human beings for that. And I get where he's coming from, and I completely understand his opinion, and can 100% respect it. And I think a lot of our viewers are probably going to fall on different sides of the aisle here. So I'll be curious to see what people might have to say in the comments below. By all means, let us know. We're open for discussion. But it seems to me that if you look at the nature of human being based fact checking, right? you have all of the problems that you would have with computer-based fact checking, and a few that maybe you wouldn't have with computer-based fact checking. And then if you look at the problems with computer-based fact checking, you get a few advantages actually, but you also get some disadvantages that that you don't have with human-based fact checking. So if you're running a human-based fact checking organization, for lack of better words, and your job and your mission is to fact check video real time, then as we've already mentioned, you're gonna have a lag, a significant lag. It's going to take you, and it should take you, if you're doing this with human intellect, it should take you a while to fact check the claims being spoken, unless it's a claim that you already have maybe in your database of fact check claims, and then you can just pop it in. Maybe the human being just says, oh, he just lied about this conspiracy. We'll throw in this bit that we have here on the video. And so maybe there's like a controller that's controlling the live debate or whatever it is that the software is being used for. So maybe in that way you could get rid of the latency problem of human fact checking, but with a computer, that can happen in a second. You don't have to worry about someone accidentally hitting the wrong key and sending the wrong, fact check to the screen. You don't have to worry about, the cost burden of deploying the software, right? So now it's more approachable and more acceptable for, let's say, maybe news organizations, whether they be local, state, whatever, to use. So not everyone can afford an entire team of fact checkers. And I've had the thought, in the past of, if you really need, if there was a WordPress plugin for WordPress-based sites, and a Drupal plugin for Drupal-based sites, and a plugin for all these different web platforms. That way, people could just easily, if they wanted to, add fact-checking tools to their news site or whatever it is they were running, a Chrome extension, a Firefox extension, et cetera, et cetera. And so, in this way, through software, you make it more approachable and you make it more scalable, and hopefully you help better educate the public, at least to as to what logical fallacies are, or if we're talking about fact checking, as we were, of the issues at hand and some common pieces of misinformation and disinformation that are being spread. So that's speaking a little bit to, and just scratching the surface on on some of the limitations and maybe the pros and cons. Obviously, you could say that computers are wrong all the time. That's true. Just as human beings are wrong, computers are wrong too. And then the other argument in this space is this idea that the people who create these AI models, they are biased in and of themselves, and that these models are going to have their own biases. But what you're pitching here is pretty, I would say it's a pretty big breakthrough, which is this idea of saying, you know what, let's get around some of those problems, and let's not box people into using ChatGPT to check this particular audio or video for fallacies. Let's let them pick any AI model that they want. They can plug in their own AI model if they want, if maybe that's what they're into and that's what they do. Or they can get one from Meta, or they can get one from Grok, the X.com - Twitter, new AI is out by Elon Musk, or they could, there's so many different AI models out there right now. A lot of people just think there's ChatGPT, but there's a whole bunch of different AI models that are produced by companies and organizations of a wide background, and even independent developers that have different beliefs. And so you could use you could use this to help confirm the beliefs you already have, even if you wanted to, right? If it's open source, then it's up to the news organizations. It's up to the individuals that are using the software. It's up to everyone how they use it. I don't know. Is that a correct way to maybe frame that and kind of frame where you're at on it?
Yeah. I want to go back to what you were talking about, the differences between what your friend has said about not being able to likely fact check with AI, and to, I guess, steelman that argument. I totally agree. If we were to just take an argument and ask ChatGPT to fact check all the claims that are being made, it doesn't have real-time data, right? It doesn't, like, whatever information that it was trained on is likely outdated already. So it's not going to be relevant to those things, and it's likely not going to do a good job, and I wouldn't trust it, right? So I do want to separate, like, this is not just going to, like, hey, ChatGPT, is this claim true or false? And by the way, don't use search and don't use anything to verify them, right? Like, just go based off your internal knowledge. And yeah, I would not trust that type of model. What I am referring to, and what you were talking about, is, right, the ability for these models to use tools like a human would. Like, if you had a group of humans that were doing this fact checking, it would be, hey, you have access to the internet, you have access to all the information you could probably need. Can you fact check this claim, right? Can you look into it? And that's kind of the direction that we're referring to. And in that case, I do think AI models could do that, right? I think they can do it, like you said, a lot faster, a lot more cheap. um I think the reason why we don't currently do that, right, is it's a lot of effort, and it's likely not going to be able to be done real time with humans, right? It would take a lot of effort to be able to do that. But with an AI model that can, it's only going to get faster and can parse through information a lot quicker, I do see a time, right, where that becomes a reality, where we can start just doing that in real time. And then the other thing that you just brought up, regarding being able to access your own models, I really think that's important here. I think that's one of the main highlights and one of the main reasons why this project is open source. Is I don't want to limit, or use, have that excuse that you're using a biased model from a biased organization to analyze a debate, and of course it's going to be biased towards one way or another. um, I think this is I think models, regardless of who trained them, are trained in such amount of vast internet information that they're going to be really good at this, regardless of the organization that they came with. I think they're going to be, and I think, like you said, this is something that's almost like computational, right? Like, doing fallacy detection is almost computational, in the sense that it you don't have to be biased towards one person or another in order to do a good job of breaking down those fallacies. And I think models, regardless of their source, can do a good job. But obviously, I want people who want to use these tools to be able to have the freedom to choose the models that they like. And I think at some point, what I'm hoping and what we're seeing now with Apple Intelligence is that this is, like, the direction where companies are going. Is like, we're gonna have a lot of these models on device, right? Like, you're gonna have your own personalized, custom model that has your context, that knows you, that knows what you like, right? And what if you can have your model, that's, it becomes like your assistant that you have using these. What if you can plug that assistant into these frameworks? So then it becomes more like an application for your AI assistant that can do this, and that you're probably more likely to trust and use and stuff like that. So I think that would be pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking of different ways that might be used. I know, me personally, I think that at some point in my adult life, I'll get a little into my background here, my personal history. I think at some point in my adult life, I realized I did not want to be someone beholden to the large companies and everyone out there who's trying to sell me a product. And I realized I didn't need a lot, didn't need much to be happy. And I think I knew that at a young age too. I think that um, I almost went through like this minimalist phase or something, where I just said, you know what, I just I don't want to spend as much. I'm sure I probably still spend more than I should. I'm as guilty as anyone on going to Amazon and buying more than I should, whatever. But I'm more mindful of it now, right? I'm more mindful of the fact that whenever I go and make a purchase, I am giving someone else a profit usually, and that's why that product exists. And I'm helping pad their pocket, and so I'm taking from me and I'm giving to them. And yeah, I'm getting something in exchange, but the whole nature of that transaction is such that they're trying to give me something that they acquired for less, and I'm giving them more, right? So um, that's usually the way that relationship goes when you buy something, right? Someone's profiting off of you. So for instance, if I had this personal companion and say my phone, I would probably want to say, hey, can you try and reduce the amount of times that I get targeted, or if I am getting targeted for a particular product, at least let me know that I'm being targeted for that product. And maybe even if you can, also tell me a little bit about that company and who they are. And are they legit? Are they legitimate? Anytime you see me getting served an ad or anything like that. Obviously, there are ad blockers and things like that you can use, but I'm just trying to think of examples where someone might personalize this in a good way, and that might be one. And I mentioned that example to precede this, the argument that that this could create echo chambers, right? There might be this fear of, if we make this open source, then people might try and tailor it to just further propel or create their own beliefs, whatever those beliefs might be. But I do think that, and maybe this is naivety, but I do think that generally speaking, most people want to know the truth and want to be discerning, consumers of information. And I do think that most people would use it in an intelligent and smart way. Obviously, it's a tool. It's just a tool, and anytime you make a tool open source and available, people can go out and do what they're going to do with it, right? Someone who makes hammers is not liable for all the people who went out and committed crimes with a hammer, right? Or with their product. But most people who buy a hammer, they're buying a hammer not to go commit a crime and use it against somebody to cause physical harm. They're buying it to go build a house or work on their little side project that they have in their garage or whatever it might be, right? And I think the same would apply for this tool. I think that rather than creating echo chambers, I think it would actually be a net good and a net positive if you gave people access to the dials and the controls where they could custom tailor it. And I think that I think they would exercise that in a more positive way than the negative way. At least most people. I don't know if you agree with that. I think that you probably do, since you're saying that's where you would like to see this go.
I mean, that's definitely the hope, right, with this product, with this project. I can see how it could just influence more echo chambers if it was being done. We talked about just reinforcing your beliefs by going through news organizations that already support your beliefs, right? And so you add this on top of they're probably not going to want to be as critical of their own stuff as the opposition, right? That's a pretty fair assessment. And you add this on there to maybe right, they try to add more credibility, but in reality, I really think having a third-party application that is not tied to an organization, right, or any piece of content that you're running that can do this on top of that it's under your control, is going to be a much better representation of the information that's being actually displayed on those on those organizations. So yeah, I can see how it can be used in that way, but I do believe in most reality, like you said, most people are going to be interested in making using this just as a good tool in general to get a good breakdown on the arguments being made by anybody, right? That's my hope, and I think it can help. It can help in a lot of ways, right? So it can help you catch things that you might have missed simply because you are doing confirmation bias on your own on your own beliefs. In reality, it's like, oh wait, no, that's a logical fallacy too that I wouldn't have caught otherwise. And it's good to know those too, right? From my perspective, I'm more interested in catching those as well, like the ones that I could have missed, because we're often more critical of somebody else's argument and not so much our own. but I want to be able to have beliefs that I can feel very good about, and being able to capture fallacies in my own arguments only helps me improve, right, my arguments and the things that I can actually stand for.
Yeah, yeah. I can't help but think of an idea for maybe a mobile app or something that um, would probably not be something that anyone who has serious privacy concerns would want to use unless they could see the source code and realize it was open source, and then they knew how to recode and they could trust it. But if you had an app that just followed you around in your pocket all day, as your phone does follow you around in your pocket, and it just listened to your voice, and maybe you trained it to recognize your voice, that way it just picked up your voice, and at the end of each day you could go and, similar to a walking steps counter that tells you how many miles you walked that day, it tells you how many logical fallacies you committed and when you committed them, right? And so you just recall your past conversations. But there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun, things to think about with this, and there's so many different directions in which you could take it. I think this idea of making it custom and making it open source is something unique to the disinformation tech landscape, to the tech landscape around disinformation based tools and technologies. And I think what's unique about it is just the open source aspect of it. So there's always going to be organizations that have a slant. There's always going to be organizations that have a spin and agenda. And those organizations, they're going to create their own tools, and they're going to do their own fact checking. That already happens. We already have that. But what we don't really have is something that's readily accessible, that's approachable, that makes the subject fun and engaging, and that's open source and tailorable, and something that you could say, I don't want to use ChatGPT. I want to drop that. I want to add in this model, or this is what I want to focus on, and this is what I want to look for. So it's exciting. It's exciting to think of what you have here and what you've created. I do think that currently there are a lot of tools for text-based analysis of logical fallacies, and also of fact checking. So I'm going to see if I can pull up a link here, and let's see. Okay, so there's a website that's called There's an AI for That. And it plays off of this idea of the phrase back in the day whenever cell phones first came out and apps were created. And there was this phrase that there's an app for that, because in the early days, for those who maybe don't remember, or for whatever reason, or maybe too young to have been around then, or maybe have missed this in popular culture, there were essentially apps that would be created by software developers for the early mobile phones that seemed like a breakthrough, almost seemed more valuable than the phone itself, in the sense that, like, wow, I can now do this on the go, and previously I couldn't do X, whatever X was, right? And we've all, I think, been amazed by different apps and features that they might have, and we all probably have our own collection of apps on our phones that we use. And that phrase, "there's an app for that," came about in the early days of app creation. And so now what this website has done is they said there's an AI for that. Okay. And I do think that there's a similar parallel between those early days of app creation and these AI tools. So if we go here to this website, I'm going to share my screen now. There's an AI for that. And let's see, it looks like it's going to present me with this pop-up. But if I refresh my screen, you can see that all of these tools right here, like the logical fallacy detector, fallacy finder, fact tool, these are all tools that people have created to try and essentially fact check or check for fallacies in text. And we can just see the fun names that they created here, right? Like Detect GPT, Is This True? Check for Factiverse. I think people realize this is an issue, and this is so this is so inspiring to see, developers rise to the cause, rise to the occasion, and start creating tools. I myself started working on a Chrome extension that does the same thing. And everyone who starts working on these different technologies, and whether it be to check text like what we're looking at on the screen, or whether it be to fact check real video like what you've created, Lino, every software developer that tries to approach this problem is going to approach it in slightly a different way. And there's lessons to be learned from that. And with that shared communal experience, it just makes it more likely that there's at least one or two, maybe three, that are really going to stick and serve the purpose that everyone's trying to serve with these products. So, yeah, there were probably a bunch of different people that try to create an Angry Birds cell phone app and game on the phone that never really made it, and made a hit. But then there was that one that did, right? And that's kind of just a fun example of, of what's happening right now. And it really is an exciting time to be alive, because this technology that we're talking about today is something that did not exist whenever Hitler gave the speech that we showed at the beginning of this podcast. There weren't a lot of fact-checking organizations that were around at that time, and there weren't any technologies that could fact-check real time, and there weren't any technologies that could fact-check text. And AI it's new. It's new to our species, and yes, it's true that it's going to be used to spread disinformation and to create propaganda. But at the same time, people are already stepping up to try and use this technology for good, and to use it to combat those problems. So, having said all of that, we've already mentioned a little bit about where you might like to see this go in the future. And I would like to, to ask, if you had to guess, if you had to just guess, obviously, it would be a guess, what the current percentage of accuracy is for detecting, we'll just say, logical fallacies, with maybe this tool that you have now. What would you guess? Would you say it's probably picking out, 50%, 70%? Obviously, we're both hoping that Moore's law holds true, right? And that it gets better over time, and I believe it will, as that's just the nature of artificial intelligence and technology. But where do you think we're currently at with the tools and with the technology?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the models. What I've had happen so far was, like, if I use obviously a larger frontier model, I noticed that it ends up being a lot more accurate. If I had to guess, I'd probably say around the 80-90%. And I would say that the 10% is not because it doesn't, like, it misclassifies something. It's more about, like, it just missed something that I would have thought it would have picked up on, right? But in terms of being fairly accurate to the fallacies that it does pick up on, it's really high up there. I've had success with smaller models that require a little bit more effort, a little bit more prompt engineering, right? A little bit more few shot examples using one of the bigger models, and then it also gets, like, fairly high accuracy, but you probably won't get as much as the larger models. But like you said, I think these tools are going to get cheaper, more accessible, better over time. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. So my own experimentation with the Chrome extension tools for researchers, I'm seeing similar results when it comes to logical fallacies. And then the other limitation I'm seeing is the context length. So if I drop a 5,000 word transcript or video transcript or article into the Chrome extension, it's only going to pick out 3 or 4 fallacies, whenever there might be 20 or 40 fallacies. And the reason is because of the limitations of my own API account and the context window for the model. But I've yet to actually explore with Claude. And Claude has a larger context model, and so you can actually potentially pull out more logical fallacies from the text, and that's not a limit of the AI model. That's just a limit of it's just a limit that they place on different accounts, right? And so, yeah, I mean, as this grows and as the technology expands and becomes more accessible, I do think more will be possible. So I know, like right now, in my extension for text analysis, if you want to fact check the entire article, you just have to do it in pieces, right? You break it down. So I'm going to give the AI model 500 words to check for logical fallacies or fact check. You can do both, or attempt to do both. And it will do that, and then you can give the next 500 words of the article. That's a little tedious, but it can be done. And obviously, ideally, at some point, the preferred outcome is to be able to just drop an entire article or academic paper in and have it run that. And I'm sure there's probably people who have already solved that problem, honestly. And that's what we hope to talk about on this show. And maybe we'll talk to somebody that has a text-based model that can crunch more text like that in the future. On that note, real quick, for the techies that are with us, before we end, I want to give the last little portion of the podcast here to the techies among us, right? So some of those who have been listening, they may not be technologically oriented or focused. They may have just listened out of curiosity and interest and support. But then also, we have a separate audience here, which is the audience that actually works in the space. And so I would like to ask you a few quick questions for those that might be interested in continuing this work. And so this last portion of the podcast will be for those who are interested in some of the specifics around the technology. You've mentioned Whisper, you've mentioned Anaconda. And you've mentioned a few other dependencies in the GitHub repo like PyAudio, PyQt5. Any quick thoughts or tips or anything like that for anyone that might be curious to know a little bit more about the dependencies being used?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty standard, machine learning type of requirements for Python. Anaconda helps you, manage your environments. So it should help you create an environment specifically for this tool. And then there's a PyQt, which is that's what does the rendering, the overlay that you were seeing. PyAudio for processing, and Whisper does the transcription. That I also have the text generation web UI. So this is a fairly popular open source web interface. But I think any API using a OpenAI type of API should work just as well in terms of getting these responses through there. It's all, I would say, fairly standard stuff. I like you said, I do hope to make this more accessible, right? Because in order to use this, you still have to, like, just having to use Git is already an accessibility barrier, right? So in the future, yeah, I hope to just make this like an executable that you can run. And you mentioned the app that you could run, and at the end of the day, go through your logical fallacies, personal ones. I would definitely have that. I personally think I would be interesting to have. So maybe something like that in the future would be kind of cool too. Obviously, with all of the restrictions and safety that on-device computing is promising, right? So I don't have to rely on sending my personal information throughout the day through some API provider, and rather I can just process it on device. And if something like that can just be done locally, then I don't see why not, right? Like I have access to all the information. It's not going anywhere. It's mine. I can wipe it and I can use it to analyze it and give me feedback and improve my arguments throughout the day. Why not?
Yeah. I do think that there's going to be an interesting story that unfolds as we see a lot of these technologies move locally, right, to the actual phone itself, or to the actual user's computer, and become a little more personalized. Super fascinating. all very, very interesting. Lino, we might have to have you on again. I know I would be 100% for that on my end, and I'm sure anyone who's viewing and listening probably would. A lot of questions that I'm sure people might have, feel free to add those in the comments in the discussion. Again, everyone, if you want to be engaged, r/disinformation tech is a great subreddit for that, although I might be a little biased, right? So that's the information I'm going to push in the podcast. That's my slant and my agenda, if you will. And then, of course, the YouTube channel where you're probably viewing this. We'll probably create a LinkedIn page for it too. Yeah, as far as the technology goes, we couldn't possibly have more people like yourself, Lino, working on problems like this and challenges like this. And I want to give you a big thanks and an air hug, if you will, for taking the time to put this together and just come on and tell the world a little more about it and what the potential is and maybe why it's important. So having said that, I want to thank everyone for watching the podcast, and we hope to see you in the next one. Till then, take care.